All right, fantastic. So welcome to the monthly Spark Talk. My name is Lisa Blue, and I'm the Director of Artificial Intelligence Strategies here at Eastern Kentucky University. Through the Spark Talks, I hope to demystify generative AI while sparking conversations that inspire innovative teaching and learning strategies in higher education. I'm very glad you've chosen to spend your afternoon, at least 60 minutes of it, with us here today. Each month, I share insights and practical strategies for integrating GenAI into your teaching, research, and scholarship. My goal is to enrich your teaching methods, empower our students, and promote the ethical use of AI while preparing students for the tech-driven job market they'll face post-graduation. I'm joined today by Dan Royalty, Assistant Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards. Dan will be watching the chat for me today and periodically dropping our resource guide into the chat. So feel free to post questions as you think of them, and Dan will let me know when we have questions, or feel free to raise your hand and Dan can call you out. So let's go ahead and get started. Dan has dropped that resource guide into the chat. We're talking today about preparing our students for an AI-enhanced workplace. Now, we do have a primary instructional charge. We're here because we want to teach to our program level, course level, and unit level discipline-specific learning outcomes, in addition to producing research and fulfilling service obligations. And so most of us are carrying a very heavy load. If you add on top of that the fact that we also need to be preparing our students for the workplace, then we have to be really creative when we think about how to integrate things such as the 10 essential employability skills developed by the Council of Post-Secondary Education here in Kentucky. These 10 essential employability skills represent some of the soft skills that are most sought after by employers. And so if we're trying to teach our discipline, but also think about integrating the instruction of these soft skills into the curriculum, but then we also have this daggone AI that has shown up recently, and AI presents compelling evidence that we really need to think about incorporating this into the curriculum. In a joint study by the Harvard and Wharton Schools of Business, it was found that an elite group of consultants, when separated into groups that did not use AI, used AI without instruction, and used AI with some coaching, the consultants that were using AI were able to complete tasks 25% faster. They were able to finish 12% more tasks, and they produced task output with 40% higher quality results. Furthermore, we see that AI functions as a skill leveler. In a separate test, the bottom half of skilled participants were assigned a baseline task, while the top half of skilled participants were assigned that same task. And the question, the consultants coach the AI or the AI experts coach the consultants? The consultants used AI to complete the task. Good question. And so these consultants were using AI to complete the task in the blue bars that you see in this particular slide. And we see that for the bottom half of skilled participants, their score on the task approached that of the top half of skilled participants. So we see that GenAI is truly a skill leveler when used on tasks that we would normally complete without AI. So instead of telling my faculty, hey, we've got to teach all of our discipline-specific student learning outcomes, plus 10 essential employability skills, plus 7 more GenAI skills, what I've done for you today is to combine the 10 essential employability skills with the 7 key GenAI skills I've identified, starting with AI literacy and progressing clockwise until we reach communication and human AI collaboration. Sorry about that. And so we'll step through each one of these GenAI skills and see how it can incorporate some of the 10 essential employability skills and what this would look like for the student. So first of all, Let's start with just a general conversation of AI literacy, what it is, how it works, and why it's important. I bet most students don't realize that they're already interacting with AI every day. If they are practicing their language using something like Duolingo, or if they're using writing assistants like Grammarly, there's AI enhancements working behind the scenes. Google Calendar has a smart scheduling feature that is AI driven, and customer service bots are all AI agents. Google Search has been recently enhanced with AI capabilities to improve the results that are given. Headspace has personalized meditation that is AI driven. I have the cheap Fitbit, so I don't have the AI insights, but we know that voice assistants such as Amazon's Alexa and Apple Siri, if not already enhanced with base level AI, they're preparing to be enhanced with even greater levels of AI in the near future. And then our streaming services like Netflix and Spotify have always been enhanced by some level of AI. In the next step, we're going to talk about understanding and leveraging AI tools. So this is this point when you start exploring how AI tools can be used to demonstrate practical applications. And the goal is to bridge the gap between theory, hey, these are all the AIs that we interact with, and practice, actually being able to use this. I feel like the best entry level AI to start students with is one of the large language models for text generation. And this is a talk that Dan and I give on a regular basis, getting started with generative artificial intelligence. There are 4 large language models that are pretty popular right now. Of course, there are quite a few others, but ChatGPT by OpenAI, Copilot by Microsoft, Claude by Anthropic, and Gemini by Google all have free options. And they all afford students the opportunity to start interacting with a generative artificial intelligence to see, based on their input, what kind of output can they get? And how can these large language models prove to be useful? When we're getting started with demonstrating this to students, we can either choose to kind of pull all kinds of different resources together and teach it based on what we've learned, which is what Dan and I have done. I've actually been teaching people how to use generative AI technology for almost 2 years now. And so I started with just trying to cobble together what I know and explaining it the best way I knew how. Since then, there's been some resources published that are really excellent. One of them is this visual explainer, Generative AI exists because of the transformer. This link is included in the resource packet. And I really like this visual explainer because each of those little boxes will change, and it kind of demonstrates the process of how a large language model as a statistical text predictor selects the next best word to complete a sentence. Another tool that I use is the Prep Edit framework from the AI Classroom. This is a group by Dan Fitzgerald and Amanda Fox, and I don't remember the third person, but I really like this prompt engineering framework because it really emphasizes to students that you need to prep the machine, but also edit the output. You can't take that output at face value and claim this is great. This is what I'm going to submit for my homework. So to prep the machine, this is talking about generating a prompt and doing so that you get output that's genuinely useful. Most of the time when we can very easily see that a student has used AI for an assignment, it's because of poor prompting. The student gives a very vague prompt and gets all the pretty words strung together, but those pretty words don't really have anything worth of value to bite into and think about and wrestle with. And so we can tell students to introduce their question or their action with a prompt, give it a role or a voice, be explicit in your instructions, and set the parameters of the answer. So this may be something like saying, I need a 500-word essay to satisfy this English writing prompt. Help me generate ideas for a topic sentence. I would never suggest to a student that they just have the AI write it for them. I'm more in favor of students using this as a co-intelligence to co-create output because, again, this is just a statistical text predictor. Once they have that output, they need to evaluate the output for the language. Is it factually accurate? Because these are statistical text predictors, we have to verify that the output is factually accurate, because sometimes the AIs will hallucinate if it's not actually able to give an answer. A classic example of this is, Dan, can you drop that resource guide in the chat again? A classic example of this is if you ask an AI to report the weather to you, and it's one of the AIs that is not connected to the internet. ChatGPT is guilty of this a lot of times. And that if you say, what is the weather for Richmond, Kentucky for October 10th? It'll give you something that sounds like a reasonable weather report, but it won't actually be the weather for that particular day, because it is averaging everything it's ever seen that's been assembled as a weather report, and it's just reporting that average set of conditions. It's real easy to take it and say, oh, that must be the weather. And then you're surprised when October 10th, hey, it's raining outside. You need to determine accuracy. You need to corroborate with sources. And this is where doing our lateral searches to verify accuracy is so important. So I love somebody's prompt engineer framework, AI classroom. Thank you so much. And so we're going to determine the accuracy and corroborate with sources, and we're going to identify biases and misinformation in the output. Because these data sets constitute the entirety of the internet, we know that there are biases, misinformation, and disinformation all contained in those data sets. And sometimes they do come through in the output. So we need to be on the lookout for that. And then most importantly, students need to transform the content to reflect their adjustments, their new findings, and to make sure it accurately represents their creative thinking and critical thought processes. Now, if all that sounds a little overwhelming, then I have a cheat sheet for you. The University of Sydney created a self-paced Canvas course for students by students. And this is in the resource guide. So if you navigate to canvas.sydney.edu.au, this is Canvas course 51655. So that link is in there. And you can see, I just got a little screenshot of the beginning of the course. It talks about what is generative AI. How can you use generative AI responsibly? And it gives you some actual prompts to use generative AI. So prompts to help you learn, prompts to help you with assessments, and prompts to help you progress. Creating resumes and cover letters, making sense of job descriptions. So all very practical. So I would suggest either using this course outright or looking at this course for inspiration when developing your own AI literacy and AI guidance for students. In step 3, we really want to start thinking critically and problem solving with AI. What this means is that once students have a basic understanding of how the tools work, what they can expect from the outputs, then we want to discuss how to use AI for genuine problem solving. This starts with selecting the right tools. We may need to improve our prompting techniques beyond the prompt edit or prep edit framework. We need to really dig into evaluating the AI outputs critically. And we want to use AI to innovate and create solutions. There are no limit to the number of AI tools to choose from. My current favorite aggregator site is aiexploria.com. And I grabbed some screenshots here, just as a little snippet of the offerings. There are image generators, there are video generators, websites and design, education and studies. We see Perplexity AI and Poe showing up, but also Chat PDF and Quillbot. There are tons of resources out there. And so I encourage you to explore these resources on your own, but also with your students. I've used Hey GenAI to create course intro videos, both myself and faculty that I work with. I had a faculty member who said, oh my gosh, I can't record myself. I'll stumble, I'll have to record it 100 times. I'm like, girl, I gotcha. Just record yourself talking naturally to Hey Gen and then feed it a script. Boom, you got your course intro. It sounded a little, not quite like her, but it was good enough and it satisfied that need for a course intro. Let's see. There are also some research-specific AIs, and this again is just scratching the surface. SciSpace, Elicit, Undermined, Semantic Scholar, Site Assistant, Research Rabbit. We saw Chat PDF. I would really encourage investigating the capabilities of these research-specific AIs to streamline the literature search process, and then show your students how to use this. If we need to work on our prompting, and a lot of times if we get poor feedback or poor output, it's because we're not prompting effectively. And one of the prompt frameworks I've found that I really like is the CoStar framework. This CoStar framework is presented in a popular article in Medium, but in Medium and also in the resource guide, I have a link to the original peer-reviewed research article that describes this. But CoStar is great because it tells you to provide the context or the background and information on the task. You define the task that you want to perform, so that's the objective. You specify the writing style you want to use. Does this need to be formal? Does it need to be casual? Are you trying to sell something? Are you trying to entice people to join a research study? And then you want to set the attitude and the tone of the response. You definitely want to identify who the response is for. Are you writing to satisfy the requirements of a lesson for your professor? Are you trying to write professionally to create your first job resume? And then you want to provide the response format and style. Do I need this to look like a LinkedIn post? Do I need to look this to look like a curriculum vitae? Does it need to look like a resume? And so the more information you can give the large language model, the better your result will be. Problems arise when we think that the AI can do all the things, but we suddenly discover that we're straying outside the frontier of AI capabilities. Ethan Mollick and his colleagues wrote about the jagged frontier of AI capabilities, which is linked in your resource guide. And we see that this wavy blue line represents the jagged frontier of AI capabilities. This jagged frontier is almost like a sine wave. It's moving, it fluctuates daily. And sometimes we may find that a task we're asking of the AI is well within the frontier. And when that task lies within the frontier of capabilities, we're going to get factually correct output, which is the goal. However, if we ask the AI to do something that it can't do, such as the early days of ChatGPT 3.5, if you would ask it to write a research paper and provide a link to literature sources, it would hallucinate a ton of sources because you were asking it to do something it wasn't capable of. These hallucinations and inaccuracies happen because ultimately the AI is trying to please its human overlord. And so the sycophancy is really dangerous when we're right on that line, and it's hard for us to tell, is this factually accurate or is this a hallucination? So that's why it's important to either do your research or essentially gaslight the AI into doing better. This is where you regenerate results, or in Gemini, you ask it, can you verify your results? And this is because we see this fluctuation in the performance because the AI models are improving daily, but sometimes they just fluctuate for reasons we don't really understand. We get these hallucinations because essentially at the end of the day, there is no notion of truth in probability. And large language models are predicting which next word in the sentence is most statistically probable. Eric Larson made this comment during an interview I sat in on a couple of days ago, and I think there is no cleaner way to explain why hallucinations happen. These are statistical text predictors. They're doing the best job they can to give us the highest probability result. So with that, we can talk about AI integration and workflow automation. So for students thinking about their daily tasks and workflows, automating processes, and enhancing productivity, this could look like organizing your notes, Google Notebook LM had recently, I guess in the last 3 weeks, debuted. And this Google Notebook LM is fantastic because you could literally go to class and record the lecture. Or if you have a mechanism at your university that automatically records lectures, you could upload that audio file. You could take a picture of your notes. You could upload that to Google LM, and then you could ask Google LM or Notebook LM to fill in the gaps. What did I miss? You could use it to query your notes and say, the professor said this word. Can you explain this word to me in terms I understand? So there are lots of AIs out there that are really helpful for organizing notes, fleshing out the notes, and acting as a tutor, more or less, to help you fill in the gaps. You can also use Notebook LM to create study guides, practice problems, or flashcards for exams. I recently demonstrated this with an OpenStax Calculus 1 textbook for our math and stats faculty. I uploaded the entire textbook to Google Notebook LM, and then I asked it to create an NPR-style podcast introducing Calculus 1 to the students. From there, I said, okay, I want to zero in on section 3.1, Introduction to Derivatives. Can you give me a summary of everything covered in this section of the text? And it gave me a bullet point list that was really, really good, which is impressive. Most of these AIs right now currently have trouble accomplishing mathematics and physics. And so I was impressed with the capabilities. I asked it, okay, so this is a great summary. Can you give me some practice problems? Which it did. And it was actually able to solve those practice problems. It was a little wonky, but it did so step by step in a manner that was both sensible and factually accurate. You can use AIs to generate snippets of code if you're working in that arena, or if you need to create visuals for presentations. A lot of the visuals I created for this presentation were either done in DALL-E using ChatGPT, or I recently found my new favorite AI, napkin.ai, and that's what I use to create my 7 steps for GenAI skills. You could also use a voice assistant to set study reminders. I'm always trying to find excuses to talk to my phone and get it to do the work for me, especially on my very long commute. And these are all great ways for students to start getting comfortable using the AI in a productive manner. What makes Napkin AI my current favorite? I like Napkin AI right now, first of all, because it's free. And I like Napkin AI because I'm always trying to generate infographics and trying to get the ideas out of my head and into a visual so I can show people what I'm thinking about. And so I like it that it has the ability to create all these different types of infographics, quick, easy, and you have lots of options for modifying the infographics and customizing them. All right. And Notebook LM is free for anyone. So yes, highly recommend that. Now, the only problem is that if we're talking about automating workflows, that's when I start to get a little twitchy, because we got to be careful about giving too much over to the AI. I would not feel comfortable automating everything. I feel comfortable automating some things. And back to that Wharton and Harvard Schools of Business joint study, whenever the group of consultants were given a task that was well outside of that jagged frontier of what AI is capable of accomplishing, the consultants were split into 3 groups. The first group was a control condition where they were not using AI. The second group in red were allowed to use AI to accomplish a task outside of that frontier of AI capabilities, but they weren't given any warnings about, hey, you might be in the danger zone here. The third group in green was allowed to use AI, but they were given some warnings about, hey, you might want to check the output for factual accuracy before you proceed. And so we see that with these 3 groups of consultants, this task that was well outside the frontier of what AI is capable of doing, those without AI were 85% correct. those that had come to find that they loved their chat GPT and it seemed to do all the things tended to over rely on chat GPT. And so we see that their correctness dropped to 60%. That's not a passing grade in my book. Those with chat GPT, but having been warned about AI use, being outside of the frontier of capabilities, still saw almost a 15% drop in their correctness. So we want to make sure that even though we find a tool and we think the tool is amazing and it can do all the things, you want to stay wary. And you always want to vet the output to make sure that you're generating factually accurate output that is free from biases and mis and disinformation. So step 5 is taking the deep dive into ethics and responsible use. And this is not to imply that we're not talking about ethics and responsible use from the very beginning, because that conversation needs to happen truly at every single step. Step 5 to me means that we're looking with discipline-specific outcomes. How can this be used in the student's major, but also how can this be used generally? And how can we use this in a way that's both ethical and responsible while avoiding the pitfalls, such as the biases, the privacy concerns, and at large, the greater societal implications imposed by generative AI use. So this is where my list starts to get long, because back in 2023, the U.S. Department of Education published the Artificial Intelligence and Future of Teaching and Learning Insights and Recommendations. And I pulled from that this list of challenges and risk. The words in black are directly from the report, but in practice, in my own experience in using these AIs, I've added some words in blue. And so we have to worry about bias, inaccuracies, and omissions in both the algorithms and the data sets on which these AIs are trained on. We need to worry about privacy. We need to protect our privacy and our students' privacy. We need to think about equity issues. If you tell a student, I want you to use one of the 4 free AIs outlined at the beginning of the semester, and yet a student chooses to pay for a more powerful model, that's an equity problem. Not all the students can afford 20 bucks a month for a chat GPT or Claude subscription. And so that's not really fair. So how do we deal with that? How do we combat that over-reliance on technology? Because we're all guilty of it. Are students cheating using AI? Are students plagiarizing with AI? And I put plagiarism in quotes here because plagiarism, by definition, is taking the work of someone else and claiming it as your own. A lot of faculty feel like taking the output from an AI is plagiarism, but I would argue that it really is not plagiarism by definition, because if the student hadn't prompted that AI into creating that output would not have existed. And so I feel like the student in this case is co-creating with the AI and not necessarily plagiarizing. And then, of course, anytime we get a shiny new tool, you run the risk of decreased social connection. Bias is inherent in our data sets, and our data sets are so large that we can only analyzing them using computational methods. And even when analyzing these data sets, can we really take the temperature and say, okay, as a whole, the world believes in this religion and this set of politics and this way of doing things? No, it's not possible. And so it's really difficult to account for the different worldviews that may be present. Some research has been done on some of these data sets. And as an example, the GPT-3 data set overrepresented men, white people, Western viewpoints, and English language patterns. This is very true, especially whenever you look at some of the outputs. And so I have a set of prompts that I like to run on a regular basis just to see where we're at with this bias thing. And so based on a conversation in my AI and education group, one of my colleagues in Egypt was frustrated that if you were asked to draw a modern Egyptian commuting to work, you would get a very antiquated version of what Egypt looks like. And so based on that conversation back in May, I started running this prompt. Do we have those same biases? Are we, I mean, we're not going to see pyramids and camels in the background, but if you ask a GPT-4o to draw modern American commuting to work back in May, it would give you an over-caffeinated male in a suit in the city. If you're a female drinking tea in the country, you're not commuting to work, apparently. So we still see that we're overrepresenting men. Just for fun, I ran this prompt this morning and said, draw me a modern American commuting to work. And the guy in front is not over-caffeinated, but we're still in a suit in the city. The guy behind him, that is the largest cup of coffee I've ever seen. So I think he's caffeinated enough for everyone, but you don't see a single female in this picture. Another one I like to do, and this one I came across just by accident. I have a really outdated headshot that I need to get redone. And because I just never find the time or can justify the expense, I was like, well, I'll just have ChatGPT draw me an image. And so the first time I asked it to draw an image of an inorganic chemist, which is my training by profession, it gave me a middle-aged male with a professorial beard, and no matter how much I stroke my chin, that beard just, no, I don't have it. And so every once in a while, I run this prompt. And I was pleased that in May, it did give me 4 images, and the first time ever, I got a female. But unfortunately, if you look at this female chemist, her lab coat is open. She has all these open chemical in the lab, so there's 2 no-nos. Where are her goggles? All the males are following proper protective equipment guidelines and working efficiently in the lab, although I would take the beaker away from the guy with the computer, but that's just from past experience. So that's progress. Out of curiosity, I ran the prompt again this morning, and I feel like this is an improvement. It wouldn't just give me 4 images of inorganic chemists. This said, I can create an image, but what do you want this chemist to look like? So describe their appearance, describe the lab setting, or the kind of work they're doing, and I'll base the image on your description. So to me, I feel like this is progress. We also have to be concerned about privacy. You always want to assume that AIs are storing all the information supplied for training. Some AIs do have the option to toggle a switch to not retain the prompt and output from a session. Regardless, you want to avoid sharing personal or sensitive information about yourself and others. As an example, I like to use AIs to write or to start writing letters of recommendation for students, especially if I'm not real sure what a physical therapy program is looking for in a graduate student. And so before I upload that student's information to an AI, I go through and I'm sure to redact all the information that wouldn't otherwise show up on a LinkedIn profile. So that's just kind of my metric. Regardless, some personal information can still be inferred from your prompting. Classic example of this, there was a person who prompted an AI and asked the AI how best to navigate a hook turn. I don't remember the prompt history, but in interacting with the AI, it got to a point where the prompter said, what personal information do you know about me from my chat history? And the AI was able to say, you're female, you're between the ages of 40 and 45, and you're in Melbourne, Australia. And while that seems disturbing, if you go back to that original prompt, tell me how to navigate a hook turn, hook turns are unique to only Melbourne, Australia. And so it's kind of interesting to see how much information they can infer just based on your conversation. My AI knows all kinds of things about me, and I'm okay with that because my AI gives much better output, which increases my ability to get things done. So it's your level of comfort there. This one I came across yesterday. I took a deep dive to get caught up on all of my AI newsletters, and I came across the eye X-ray. 2 Harvard students took a pair of Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses, and in connecting it to some databases, they discovered that just by looking at a person's face, they could come up with their home address, their name, their phone number. And if you go to this link, it actually goes to Anfun Nguyen's X account where he demonstrates this. And it's really eerie because he takes these glasses and he's in a subway and he looks at a middle-aged female, walks up to her, calls her by name, and says, "Hey, I know you from this organization where we met briefly." They had never met. He made this up on the fly based on the information he was able to discern from his Meta Ray-Ban glasses. And so I really encourage you to follow that link, take a look at what they were able to do with this, and more importantly, follow the link in that tweet to their Google Documents that talks about the information that they found that was connected to this and how to protect yourself from just a situation like this. And then we need to think about the broader societal implications of AI scaling. There are a lot of problems with AI. We need to think carefully about those people that are vetting AI content to remove all the disturbing content so it's not consumed by the public at large. Those people are usually in non-speaking English countries trying to tweak the AI for those individuals that don't speak English, and they usually make a terrible non-living wage to do so. We also have to think about these constraints to scaling AI because I think we're going to keep scaling this. Ranjana, yes, that link is in the resource guide. If we look at this particular article, and this link is also in the resource guide, if we continue scaling at the current rate, and so AI is scaling at roughly 4 times per year, we see that by 2030, the main limitation is going to be power. We've heard recently about coal-fired power plants coming online to support this. One of the reactors at 3 Mile Island is scheduled to come back online to support AI computing. And so power constraints are going to be the main thing keeping us from scaling significantly beyond that 2 times 10 to the 29th flops, which is a measure of how fast AI can process information. We also have to worry about chip production capacity, and this is everything from raw materials to retooling to making the specialized facilities that make these chips. Data scarcity is always a concern. And then the latency wall, or how fast an AI can generate a response, is still also a concern. If you have to spend 10 seconds waiting for the AI to think, people are going to get frustrated and move on to something else. And so this is just scratching the surface of the societal implications, but these are all things we need to think of. If it's truly taking the equivalent of a bottle of water every time we generate a prompt, should we be doing that? Step 6, we want to think about continual learning and adaptability. And this is a question I get all the time. Where do you get your information? How do you keep up with this? There are a couple of really good books that look at general information technology. There are books that look at AI in the classroom. There are books that talk about AI governance. There are a ton of blogs. There are people that are active on LinkedIn and Facebook and X. And it's a matter of finding those people who seem to be having a large following. So Ethan Mollick is one I follow. Lance Eaton, I follow. Leon Burrs, I follow. So eventually you get in these spaces and you just try to keep up and you try to make sure you're not getting 30 emails a day from AI newsletters. And so you want to talk to your students about, you've got to stay on top of this to some extent and talk about strategies for staying current and adaptable to new tools and methodologies. And Diana says, I get everything, including this webinar on the AI and Higher Ed Facebook group. Yes, I love that Facebook group, and also the Writing with AI Facebook group that is moderated by Laura Duman. That one is really good as well. And so it's tough to do. And I think Ethan Mollick said it best when he said, every week it seems like AI serves up a new miracle or a new concerning development. I was giving a keynote at Missouri State University in August, and I was highlighting the work of 5 faculty members using AI effectively on campus. And I introduced one of the faculty members who shall remain nameless, and he said, "Yeah, when I first started reading about AI, I thought, what fresh hell is this?" Yes, thank you, sir, for saying the quiet part out loud. And we've got to watch out for things like this. There was a short time, about 6 days, if I recall, where Google's AI was giving all sorts of terrible results. And what had happened was Google had purchased the Reddit database to train its AI. Data scarcity is real. There is a race to find data to train all of the AIs. And for a while there, Google's AI would give some really bad results. It would, I'm suicidal. What should I do about it? And it would tell you the absolute wrong advice. This one, according to geologists at UC Berkeley, you should eat at least one small rock per day. And it quotes Dr. Joseph Granger. He suggests eating a serving of gravel, geodes, or pebbles with each meal. Okay, Google didn't intend for that to get out. And I actually tracked down the source of this. There is no Dr. Joseph Granger. I wanted to see if he was at UC Berkeley and how he was dealing with this fallout. Come to find out, this was actually an article posted by The Onion back in 2021. And so you want to be careful about what you're using to train your AIs on. And you also want your students to be aware of the fact that sometimes we get some bad data in the training data sets, and it's going to wind up giving us some awful results. You also want to explore the positives. You definitely want to emphasize to your students ways that AI can be used for good. So in October of 2023, there was a research article published talking about how AI can diagnose type 2 diabetes in 10 seconds just from analyzing your voice. And they used 14 vocal features in the AI focus, and the AI focused on slight changes in pitch and intensity, which humans can't do. So there's lots of great ways that AI can be used for good. Another article I found talks about AI under the microscope, using algorithms to power the search for cells. There's also AIs being used to help pathologists grade tumors. There is an extreme shortage in trained pathologists right now. And so our pathologists are working long hours, and the longer hours they work, the more likely it is they are to make errors. And so the AI has been trained to help them appropriately grade tumors so that patients get the correct treatment. Ranjana, why can't we know what AI is being trained on? That's a great question. We can't know because they're not willing to tell. And it's very rare when the AI corporations will reveal their data sets. Finally, just take some time to explore the discipline-specific impact with your students. You want to talk to them about, what advances are being made in the field? How will GenAI affect your future career? How proficient do you need to be in using GenAI? Are you in a field where having that competitive edge is absolutely necessary to land a job interview? Or are you in a field where they're adhering to the old school principles? I see this with journalism and communication majors. They're so focused on making sure that they are developing factually accurate content that GenAI is kind of shunned, and understandably, because it's their craft, it's what they do. And why would you outsource that to an artificial intelligence? And so we want to talk about how they can maximize their employability, which I think is a conversation we need to be having with our students anyway. Finally, we want to talk about communication and human AI collaboration. So we want those skills necessary for collaborating with AI and communicating with AI, and including how to work alongside AI systems and how to explain complex AI concepts to non-experts. So kind of what I'm doing here today. We want everybody to be able to say, I picked the tool, I used the tool this way, this is how I modified the output, and this is why I modified the output. So can we talk about this in plain English, non-technical terms? So rather than belaboring the point, I would just offer up the excellent article by Ethan Mollick called Centaurs and Cyborgs on the Jagged Frontier. And he didn't have a good graphic for that, so I had DALL-E generate a graphic of centaurs and cyborgs to illustrate this concept. And in that article, I think it's one of the best quotes. And Ethan says, on some tasks, AI is immensely powerful. And on others, it fails completely or subtly. If it's failing in a subtle fashion, it's on that jagged frontier. And unless you use AI a lot, you won't know which is which. So, with all that being said, I highly encourage you to go back to your academic units and generate an action plan. Start with this resource guide and these descriptions and talk about where can we start interleaving these skills into the curriculum. I've done this exercise with a number of different universities, colleges, and academic units. And most often they say the AI literacy and leveraging AI tools could belong in an intro to university life course. Some of the higher level skills, the critical thinking and problem solving, AI integration and workflow automation, those could be in a gen ed that everybody needs to bump into. Even the ethics and responsible use could potentially still remain with a gen ed, but the continuing learning and adaptability and the communication and human AI collaboration really needs to reside with the student's major, because you want to see what that looks like in the job market before you graduate. When we're thinking about developing this action plan, who's going to be responsible for teaching these skills? How will this person be trained? Will new classes need to be developed? Or do we develop Canvas or LMS modules that can be delivered asynchronously and just given to select groups of students, making sure that every student that hits this particular gen ed gets these different AI literacy and integration skills. All right. So at the end of the day, once we have our action plans, I really want to encourage you to move beyond this human of the gaps mindset. We're not scrabbling to find, oh, AI can do this and AI can do that. What does that leave for me? Okay, that's not the right mindset to pursue at all. Instead, I like what Dan Fitzpatrick said in his AI Educator newsletter, September 15th. He said that our children's future isn't about competing with AI. It's about being so unapologetically human that the question of working for or against AI becomes irrelevant. And I hope we can instill that mentality with our students so that they use AI in a responsible and ethical manner. And so with that, I would welcome any questions that you have. Dan, were there any questions I needed to address, or have you covered them all during the presentation? Oh, and
there was a question earlier about using Notebook LM with recording lectures and classes of that nature.
Okay, fantastic. So whoever asked that question, what was your question? We could go back and dig through here. Let's see. All right, so here, is Notebook LM free? Yes, it is. And what were the other questions about Notebook LM?
There was one question, and I can't recall verbatim, but it
was asking. I found it.
Okay.
Okay, so Regina asked, would you recommend students to record your lectures or seminars with it? That is going to be a question that is specific to your comfort level. I came from an institution where we used Echo 360 capture technology to automatically record all of our lectures. And with like an hour or two delay, those recorded lectures would automatically be posted to our learning management system for students. And so I was used to being recorded every single day that I was in the classroom. So for me, this was no big deal. If you have a policy or you feel uncomfortable about students recording, then I would have that conversation with them. But I think recording the lectures and allowing students to use that audio and drop it into Notebook LM is a fantastic resource. And I could see where having that audio available might also provide some accessibility to students that would otherwise need a note taker or CART technologies because they're deaf or hard of hearing. And so, yeah, it's definitely a privacy issue. It depends on your comfort level. It depends on the resources you have available at your institution and whether or not you want students recording your lectures. So Regina, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. And I see Matt also chimed in. Thank you so much, Matt. All right, what other questions? Let's see. And I put up the last slide. And let's see. Michelle, you made a list for faculty in August. What is that list? Is that for faculty to see what AIs are being trained on, or is that a list for different newsletters?
It's a list of data sources that AI was trained on.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
Great. Sarah Porn, the AI is vital for the classroom. How do we select safely for the computer class? That is a good question. Do you have specific concerns?
Yes, my university asked me to get permissions from the IT before
Okay.
I use in my class.
Okay. And then how'd that conversation with IT go?
For Adobe products, I got good to go. But
Okay.
the new one that you suggest that I learned from what you're saying here, most of it students have to sign in. That's something that I'm concerned because from the first conversation, we don't want to give away too much student informations.
Agreed. Agreed. And Adobe is one of those products that is really catering to education. Grammarly is another one that seems to be inherently safe, and it has a lot of educational guardrails that I really appreciate. So thank you for that. Let's see, Stephen asked, do you see a role for career services teaching these skills at the university level? Absolutely. The more people that we can get involved in teaching this, the better. And I think that working with first-year courses and career services is an excellent way to get this information out there. Let's see. How do you suggest for me to fact check AI? Googling. That is a great question. Googling's not enough. Whenever I am fact checking, a lot of times I never use just one AI. I usually use 3 AIs to bounce ideas off of all 3 of them. And I always make sure to use an AI that is connected to the internet so I can get some sources to start getting an idea of where this information is coming from. Notebook LM will actually grab sources, which is fantastic. And I think going back to the research AIs is a really great way to make sure that you're getting factually accurate information. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see. Has anyone used AI tools in their final year undergrad student dissertation module? Ooh, that is fantastic. All right, so has anybody done that?
I can talk because I've just taken on a final year dissertation course, and it used to be 6 months. Now it's over a year long. So all the resources are, from research methods to the actual dissertation, have to be redone by me as module leader. And I thought it'd be absolutely brilliant for me, but also I think good practice just to update everything integrating AI into the new revised course. And
I agree.
originally I thought I would like to do a project calling it co-designing dissertation module with AI with students, but the ethics procedures take so long that I can't do the pre-launch and then post-launch. So I will have to still do the work, but I won't be able to do the research projects, asking students what do they know beforehand and write it down. I've asked them in class already because the classes started 2 weeks ago. But I just simply would like to know what others are doing, because our university policy until summer was that students were not allowed to do AI. And so when I took over the module, I said, like, well, I asked the predecessor, have you considered integrating AI tools? And they said, like, no, because not allowed to. And I like, surely that's going to change. Yes, it changed the policy. And but I know as well other very good, well-ranked universities in the UK, at least, they are still behind. They are still not allowing AI to be used. And I think, come on, we need to just get our students be employable. You know, they're graduating within 6 to 9 months. And our students, and 100% of them used AI, and 100% of them use paid tools, so like subscription-based tools. So I thought, like, what are we doing by burying our head in the sand, right?
You can say AI is forbidden all day long, and all that means is that students are going to use it anyway and just not tell you about it.
Yeah, and so I think I need to educate myself as much as possible, but also, you know, if there are anybody who's running a dissertation module and has got experience on integrating AI in their dissertation module, I'd love to hear. And I put my email in the chat, so feel free to email.
Absolutely. And I would highly encourage you look up Laura Duman. Laura deals with, okay, you're familiar with her work?
Well, I've just picked up from your talk. I know Ethan Mollick and a couple of others who I've been following since the start, and Mushtaq Bilal and so on, but not Lala, because I've not been on Facebook much the last maybe 3 years or 4 years, or since when it went downhill. But I will check her out. Thank you for mentioning her.
I would definitely look her up. She has her own website, and she writes extensively about using AI for writing. And she actually co-developed a Macmillan AI for Faculty course that I co-facilitated over the summer. And so she has a lot of resources, and she shares them freely. And I would just encourage you to keep pushing, because you're doing the right thing for students. And honestly, thinking about our students and their employability is why I do all the things I do to produce this information. So yes, please.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So please, you're welcome. Stay in touch, and good luck. You also asked, does anyone use AI for marking or grading? And if so, which tools?
This is, of course, Chatham House rules, as we say in the UK, right?
Yes. I appreciate that you asked that question, because I think that the AI is not capable of grading all types of assignments. And I'm actually developing a professional learning community for the spring semester to investigate just how extensively AI can be used to grade accurately. And I will be producing another Spark Talk to share the results of that. So in the coming months. So stay tuned.
Super. I mean, you can, of course, put the entire rubrics, assessment rubrics, already into, ChatGPT, and I ask students to look up what they write and compare to the rubrics, etc. But that's still not grading, right? But it is also a joke that we spend more time grading or marking AI-generated papers.
Yes.
And not making our lives easier. Hence, I'm just putting out the uncomfortable questions and push it. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome. So we're at top of the hour, and I just want to address a couple of things really quickly. Can one assume that anything is open source and has been trained to use AI? That's a probably yes. Notice that LinkedIn recently admitted that LinkedIn in the United States, they're using our data to train their AIs. Facebook uses it. In Australia, Facebook does not allow you to opt out. Laura asked, could you provide a list of some people to follow in the guide? I will do that. I will update the guide and I will email the guide and a link to the recording later this afternoon. And Matt notes that he created a custom GPT to grade discussion boards. It's not great. It's because it's still a statistical text predictor. All right. I want to thank you all again for your time and attention. This has been a delightful session. If you have questions, feel free to email me a follow-up, and I would love to continue the discussion after today. Until then, I will see you next month with another Spark Talk.
Thank you.